Hey everybody, this is my kitty cat Maddie. Isn't she so sweet? Oh, look at her sweet face. Anyway, on to complex numbers and imaginary numbers. This is from section 1.6. I'm going to just do, this video is going to be on one or two topics, and there's going to probably be about 3 videos on this section because it's a little bit complicated. Imaginary complex numbers. This is what's kind of going on here. When we have a situation like this, when we're dealing with a set of real numbers, there is no solution to this, okay? But mathematicians are kind of like, hey, I think we need to deal with this a little bit because this is an actual, we actually have a thing here. I mean, there are actually equations that mean something, like parabolas that maybe don't have zeros that cross the x-axis, but they're still important phenomena. So mathematicians said, hey, we need to come up with some kind of number system that's going to account for these irregular situations. So they came up with these complex numbers. There's a few rules you have to follow when you're dealing with complex numbers, and I'm going to teach those to you. Complex numbers are used quite a bit in science, physics, electrical engineering. So they are used. Whether you use them or not in your life, I don't know. But if you go into any of those types of fields, you will use complex numbers, and you'll hit some complex numbers all the way through calculus. So a couple things you definitely need to know. This is the first and foremost. You have got to know this. No getting around it. The square root of -1 is denoted with the lowercase I, okay? I is the square root of -1, okay? This is very, very important to know. The other thing that is very important to know is what I squared is, because it turns out that when you square I, you actually get a real number, okay? So let's think about what this would be. I squared, we know that I is the square root of -1. If I were to square that, I would get what? Scream it at the screen. You know this. If I square this, I'm going to actually get -1. So I squared is -1. So this right here is super important to know, as is this. Okay? I square root of -1, I squared is -1. The other thing, a little bit of vocabulary, when you're dealing with a complex number, it is in the form of this, a plus bi. A and b are real numbers, okay? I is your imaginary number. I is basically the square root of -1. So this is your real part of your complex number. This is your imaginary part. Oops. Part of your complex number. And we will graph these, and we will look at this a little bit in more detail in a later video. Okay, what I want to do right now is just have you get used to a couple operations with this, okay? So next, I want to just solve a couple simple equations and invoke our newfound our newfound imaginary numbers, and see how it fits into all this stuff. And I think that it'll make sense when you see an example. I'm going to change this to red. If we're solving this equation, just like we did in the section before, we have to take the square root of both sides. Okay, we are going to do that. So x is going to equal plus or minus the square root of -28. We pretty much did this last section. Here's the problem. There's a negative number under here, but we're just going to break down what's inside the radical like we did in the section before. Okay, I know that -1 times 28 gives me -28, so I'm going to break out that negative. Always do that. And I also know that 4 times 7 gives me 28. Alright, now we're getting somewhere. Now, as you know from the section before, I can break these out into their independent radicals. So that's the square root of -1, that's the square root of 4, that's the square root of 7. We know this is I, this is 2, So I'm going to actually put the 2 first because it's customary to see the real number before the I times the square root of 7. So that is this simplified. 2I times the square root of 7. Okay, this equation, I'm going to go through this one. Subtract 9 from both sides. Negative 4y squared equals 48. Divide both sides by 4, or negative 4, excuse me. So y squared is now equal to negative 12. Same situation over here. We got to take the square root of both sides. Okay, y equals plus or minus the square root of negative 12. Break it down. Negative 1. We know that 2 factors of 12 are 4 and 3. I picked 4 and 3 because 4 is a perfect square. This is I. This is 2, just like we did before. So we've got 2I times the square root of 3. Nothing we can do about that. And that is our answer to that equation.